I was bullied.
And I was a bully. Bryan's stutter was one of the many things that I bullied him over.
I always believed that I didn't have anyone to talk to or share what I was going through.
It's amazing how a sincere, simple apology can change everything.
Hi. So, the word on everybody's lips everywhere around the world right now is adolescence. And it would be remiss of us not to have a discussion about all the takeaways from it in terms of what we do in our bully dialogues. Now, just a reminder to some of you who may be new to us, the premise of what we do or what we are as bully dialogues is Clinton and I are a once upon a time former bully and his victim, who years later had a reconciliation, and we have made this a very passionate subject for ourselves to highlight bullying and its effects in all manner of speaking. Now, the one thing we always say in our keynote is that there are certain things that no matter when or how the bullying happens, certain things never change. One of those is the reasons why people bully, and there are always reasons, and the impact that it has on people who are bullied, which can be so far-reaching and so and cause damage at a depth and a level of time that nobody really understands unless you've been a victim. But what has changed and what continues to change, and we see it in adolescence, are the means and the methods. And whereas when we were at school, bullying was in your face, it was confrontational. You knew who was bullying, you knew what they were saying, you knew what their intentions were. In past years in social media, it's become a lot more covert and anonymous, with the kind of phrases like telling somebody to go and kill themselves, or that they're worthless or useless. And eventually that has driven certain teenagers to suicide. But now we have a very real and alarming scenario of a coded language that has driven somebody to murder.
I mean, it's not only the coded hidden language. If you look at the past podcasts that we've done, cancel baiting, where you deliberately provoke someone into reacting in a certain negative way, and then try to cancel them or berate them or belittle them or whatever it is you do based on that reaction when you deliberately provoked it. Bullying as entertainment, another podcast we did. Bullying as bullying by algorithm. Mm-hmm. So all of those things were at play in this series, and you saw all of it and how it impacted all those different things. Because everyone's talking about this. It's one of Netflix's most watched series, certainly for 2025, and probably one of their all-time most watched. And everyone's talking about it. And I mean, I've read so many articles, I've seen so many analyses and things like that. Still, what we bring to the table that I haven't seen is we come at it from the perspective of both a bully and a victim. And so I think maybe to unpack that from that perspective, what we saw would be a good way for us to do this.
I think one of the first ways in that we can both relate to individually is the thing of the awareness of our parents, because those of you who've seen it, you know that both with the parents of Jamie, his father, and the cop and his son, there's this lack of awareness by the parents of what is really going on with their kids, and that's not necessarily a new concept. It's a dangerous concept, and one which we experienced, and sometimes it's not always it's not always nefarious. I mean, my parents did not know what I was experiencing at school, and my situation was one that was not entirely unique. I'm sure there are many people who have a situation where they are feeling bullied at home by parents or siblings and bullied at school. So they are pushed from pillar to post, not knowing who they can trust or who they can talk to.
You know, when we were preparing for the keynote, we did we presented to my mom, and actually at a later point, my dad and his wife, my stepmother, also came to see. And they were completely blown away because they had no idea that I had been a bully. You know, and I mean, I did get into trouble at school quite a bit and was suspended. And so all of the things they did know about, they certainly knew that I wasn't an angel at school, but the bullying was never recorded or spoken about. They were never told about it. I certainly didn't run to home to tell them, guess what I've been doing.
Sure.
So they were, you know, which is a big theme in adolescence, because his parents thought he was safe at home. He was on his phone upstairs in his room, which is what you think all teenagers do.
And therein lies the rub, is that we came from a time when being alone in your room was being alone in your room. In today's world, a kid being alone in their room is not alone. They may be alone in the physical four-wall space, but they are disappearing and being drawn into worlds beyond what parents are comprehending. And when I say even comprehending, you know, it's that parents will look at their kid's phone and go, show me what you're reading. And there'll be what seems to be an innocent, naive string of emojis. Now, think about how we all use emojis as a means of expression or tone. And what has evolved and is constantly evolving is this very aggressive and insidious coded language of bullying that is understood by a certain group of people when a number of emojis are placed almost in a sentence.
Well, I mean, I think in some ways that's the genius and the tragedy of it in some ways, because, you know, kids are always going to have a language, slang words, new words that an older generation's just not going to know, or they'll learn or whatever, but it's not what they used, and language changes. And certain, we spoke about this when we did the Wicked episode, that wicked doesn't mean evil like it did when we were young. Wicked can be used to mean cool and awesome. So, things like that change generationally. I've never loved emojis anyway. I've always found them to be like a crutch for people who don't know how to write properly. I know it sounds arrogant, but That's just the way I've just always disliked them. Like, if it's meant to be funny, then write it funny. You don't need a little funny laughing face at the end just to show that it's funny. But anyway, I digress. But the thing is that...
No, if you really want to piss Clinton off, use an exclamation point.
Oh, don't even get me started on those. Don't even get me started on those. That would be bullying me if you sent me stuff with exclamation marks. But here's the thing. This language, that they were using, if a parent looked at the phone, you would see these innocuous emojis like a coffee cup, that and may at best look like, if you're kind of a hip parent, like, okay, maybe it's playful banter that's going on. But actually it's this toxic, mean thing that people in the know do know what it means. And oftentimes, like, there's a coded message that the sender knows exactly what it means, and so does the recipient. And so, and again, it's innocuous. What does a coffee cup mean? If a coffee cup is placed in response to something in certain places, that's to disparage a woman's point of view. Like, who gives a shit what she has to say? Who's going to know that? I mean, we actually are doing a whole series, an Instagram series, on what some of these emojis mean, because I think it really is useful. But that was one of the takeaways, is that even if you are an engaged parent, and even if you are interested in your child's life and have time and are taking an interest in doing everything you can to be there, there's still stuff that you aren't going to know.
And one of those reasons is because oftentimes a bullied kid, I'm going to compare this, and I know that there's a lot of people who would go, being bullied and being raped are not the same thing. But in effect, they are, because being bullied is about being the target of a disproportionate abuse of power. And in a sense, rape is not about sex. Rape is about control. And rape is about a disproportionate abuse of power. So what I'm saying is that for people who are either raped or who are bullied, there's all sorts of guilt and shame and all sorts of negative feelings that prevent them, and I say us because I wasn't us, from wanting to admit that we were weak enough, that we were a target, and we weren't in a position to respond to it. And for those people who are perpetrators, who don't share it either, it's because there may be at some point, yes, there's always a motive and a reason why people bully, and we've always said that bullying is a result. It's an effect. It's a symptom of a much deeper rooted cause. But even those people who do bully don't want to suddenly go, "Hey mom, hey dad, guess what I did? I went and I destroyed someone's life."
We talk about shame and stigma.
Yeah.
And even when you're dealing with the parents of bullies, people who bully, you having to phrase things in a particular way so as to engage the parents in the conversation, and it really helps to frame bullying as a behavior rather than as an identity, because then they're open to the discussion, there's open to change. But in this context, what you're talking about, I think when a person is doing the bullying, they have a very deliberate, selective audience who they want to tell, because they want to project, no matter how ill-conceived, they want to project either a strong strength or power or whatever it is. And so they might not want teachers to know, they might not want their parents to know, but they certainly want the people who they're performing this for to know, and certainly want the person they're victimizing to know. The shame at that level is, as you say, you don't want to admit that you've been bullied and emasculated and belittled and all of these things that are happening to you. And so it's interesting because when I was watching this and I was seeing things from Jamie's perspective, which I suppose we're meant to, because even though he's the one accused of murder, but you see how he was being bullied. And you see the source of his rage and the rage that ultimately made him murder. And so I was thinking of you at that point in time, because I was thinking that, you talk about in our keynote, you talk about how how you gained confidence in all of these things on one hand as you grew up and had left school, but that there was also another part of you that self-harmed and that was self-destructive.
Correct.
And so you internalized and you took that rage and you kind of turned it on yourself. He didn't do, he took it out on the perpetrator. And so when I was like, when I sort of those thoughts clicked, there was a part of me that was like, phew, like I'm lucky that you didn't snap in some way.
Well,
and come to school with a gun, or I don't know. I mean, we didn't really do that.
We didn't do that. And we were in a time, we were also in a conditioning of, if you were bullied, it meant you were seen as weak. And therefore any kind of radical response, as you talk about, was just not even in the equation. And I think when you hear of the tragedies of kids who are victims, who are driven to suicide, that speaks to what you've just said, which is about internalizing it and taking it on, and taking on what is being said about them rather than believing in what they are, because they are taking on the shame and the degradation and the humiliation, and they feel like they can't face the world. When you and I talked about this, about adolescence the first time, and I said to you, I thought that the line from being bullied to murder was a stretch, and you were like, no, it's not really. And then I sort of thought about it, and I was like, yeah, it's actually not. It's a snapping point, but every teenager, at some point, whether you are the most well-adjusted, whether you are the most fucked up, whether you are the most rebellious, whether you are the most compliant, the child imagination and the teenage imagination, and even the adult imagination. I mean, when people have experienced betrayal, or they've been hurt, or they've been put down by a relationship, or by somebody who has gone out to destroy them, we all have murder fantasies. We do. I mean, I had teenage fantasies of murdering my father. And
not of me, I hope. Or did you?
I don't remember, but I probably did. But it's a bit vague.
Yeah.
But certainly my father was somebody that I had these teenage fantasies of how I would get rid of him. It needs to be said, I need to just add a caveat that as an adult, he'd already passed, and as an adult, I realized that he wasn't actually deliberately mean and unkind and distant. He was a product of his upbringing, and he did the best of what he could with what he knew, and that I forgave him for that. So I just want that made clear here, so that it's not seen like I'm still carrying these hectic, father issues.
Right.
But we all have fantasies about murdering somebody, but it's a very different thing when the level of rage and the level of humiliation and degradation has been taken to such a point that the only way is to do what he did, which is stab her 7 times. Once is not an act of aggression. 7 times, and you see his body language on the CCTV. It was such an expression of rage. So,
well, I want to tap into that rage thing, one thing. Just by the way, I don't know that I've had fantasies of murdering someone. I mean, maybe I'm seeing certain politicians or whatever murdered, I've fantasized about, but I don't know if I've been the perpetrator in those fantasies. I just don't think I have, that I can think of,
well, I'm
off
sorry
the top of my head.
You're missing out.
But just in terms of that rage that you're talking about, so you're being bullied, right? You can't talk to your father, you can't do anything, and so you have to stew with it. There's no outlet for it.
Right.
It's pre-internet in your case, so there's nothing you can do about it. It's you and your experience of what you've lived through that day.
Right.
Now, and in Jamie's case in Adolescence, he's being bullied online, so everyone's witnessing it, and even people that you don't know are witnessing it. And you see that with the detective's son, who knew what the emojis were and who had been following the thread but was lurking and hadn't posted or anything, so he was not present. No one knew he was there, but he was there and watching. And Jamie knew also that other people were watching and seeing, aside from all the people who were doing the emojis. So now he's at home, right? His parents think he's safe upstairs. He's being bullied online. He's witnessing all this shit happening online. And he doesn't have to go anywhere. He then gets directed through some shit algorithm that makes Mark Zuckerberg money, or Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos or whoever else, some tech overlord, is directed to someone like Andrew Tate, who's feeding into the rage and who's exacerbating the grievance and saying, yes, people are going to bully you and women are going to think that you're not worth it and that you're ugly and that you have a right to defend yourself, and women are only there to service you and to bear your children. It's not even about, Andrew Tate even says sex isn't even about pleasure, it's about reproduction. That's all women are good for. And that you're weak if you're having sex for pleasure is among some of the bullshit that Andrew Tate spews.
Then I assume by that theory that that for pleasure he's fucking men.
Well, yeah, I mean, I saw some post quoting that and saying, I've never seen anyone so desperately try to hide that they're in the closet. But that notwithstanding, that toxicity, that demeaning and diminishing and reducing women to nothing other than reproductive vessels for men to own and abuse is is what's being fed to this guy. So what does that do to his empathy when a woman is bullying him, a girl in this case, she wasn't even grown yet, a young woman, is bullying him, and he's being told that she's a piece of worthless shit anyway and shouldn't even have a voice. So when he's stabbing her 7 times in rage, of course he doesn't have empathy because he's been taught not to have it. That it's not worth wasting your empathy on that. You should be feeling sorry for yourself that, and there's this stupid 80-20 theory that they have, that 80% of women only like 20% of men, and the rest of you are fucked. And that's why they call themselves incels, which is involuntary celibates. And that was what he was being accused of.
Right.
And so the question is, was he enraged because she was bullying him? Was she enraged because she was calling him an incel in front of everyone? Or did he see incel as a badge of pride and was bullying her just because she tried? Like, we don't know that. And it's actually not that relevant even. But it just shows that there are all these different nuances that make it difficult to find out what the actual triggers exactly are.
Oh. We say all the time in our keynote, we know that in the Q&As there's always going to be a question from a parent or somebody about how to solve their particular situation. And the one thing about us confronting this topic head on is that we wish we had a one-size-fits-all answer. But while we have our points of view about how to approach it that is slightly different from what the norm has been in terms of a harm reduction approach as opposed to a trying to remove and eradicate approach. And that's what every situation like Jamie's, every situation is unique. And it's all unique. Why? Because the circumstances involved, the dynamics involved, the class, as an upper class, lower class, the demographics, the family setup, all of that contributes to an entire picture. What you've raised as well here, Clint, is something which you mentioned, the cop's son, and how he was able to watch. And so he didn't go to his father, who was a cop, and say, "This is going on," until the murder had happened, and he revealed. So we would consider him a bystander of sorts, because he was literally standing by and watching.
I mean, yeah, we differentiate between a bystander and enabler, right?
I was getting there.
Okay, good.
Because the enabler is the guy at school who gave Jamie the knife. So the fact that he gave him the knife means that he was enabling an act. Did he know that Jamie was going to stab her 7 times? Probably not. But the fact is, he gave her the weapon, and so he could have said to Jamie, "Why do you want a knife?" And I'm not giving you one. That would have been a form of not enabling.
Although I think it's fair to say, obviously, there's a difference between murder and bullying, and I would say that the enablers were the people laughing, putting clown faces, adding their emojis, so like spurring her on and sort of that's the enabling, because they're actively participating in some way in the bullying and they're making it worse. Whereas he was, the bystander, who
The cop's son.
the cop's son was the bystander. In the case of Ryan, or whatever his name is, the friend who gave him the knife,
Ryan.
that's one step beyond enabling. That's literally an accessory to murder in
legal terms.
in criminal terms.
Yep.
Yeah. And so, it's definitely a form of enabling, but it's more than enabling. It's equipping, and basically a component. That's why you get tried as an accessory. You know, I mean, it would be interesting if we liken how we treat bullying and focus on the punishment, which we don't, and don't think that's the way to go. But a way of punishing bullying would be to say, okay, if you enable it, then you're going to be regarded as having done the bullying yourself.
Right.
Which we're not recommending. In fact, we completely don't agree that even the bully should necessarily be punished, but rather held accountable, whatever that looks like. But there's a distinction.
Because it's our contention, and it's our it's what we drive home in our keynote, is that we believe that bullying, as I said, is an effect. It's not a cause. And when you deal with the effect, i.e., you punish, or you aren't dealing with the cause, and therefore the effect is going to repeat itself and repeat itself. So all you're doing is you're putting a Band-Aid on a festering wound. If you are able to deal with the cause and the why, that is where you have the greatest opportunity to shift the mindset of somebody who is bullying into somebody who can become a leader and become empathetic and who can be in that position of power, but in a positive way. It's not, you want to, people who bully are people who want to be heard, people who need to be heard, people who are going after those who they perceive as weaker. So they want to be in a position of leadership. But get them at the root cause, and that's how we believe the change is made.
Another interesting part, though, an interesting that I found, I think was perhaps one of the most profound lines of the entire thing, is that, you know, in the aftermath, Jamie's parents are questioning every decision they ever made regarding him. Like, should we have done more? Should we have gone to his room? Should we have looked at his phone? Not that they would have understood the emojis, but had they didn't do that even. And it's not an indictment. There's some parents who are working and who are busy and who can't afford to just be that involved. So it's not just an indictment on parents. Like, some parents just don't have the resources available to be that involved. But even in this case, when they were questioning, and their daughter, Jamie's sister, who had been their rock, because all of their lives were torn apart by this, right? Which really demonstrates how this can impact more broadly the family and then the society and the community around. And what was striking is that she was just incredible and kind and forgiving, and just giving her parents space to be with their grief and all of that. And at one point, the father says to the mother, "How did we make her?" And the mother says, "The same way we made him." Which to me, like, hit me in the guts for some reason. It was just like, fuck, because what do you do? Like, you can't, you know, we talk about bullying beginning at home and how the parents need to recognize and what they say at the dinner table matters,
Right.
and all of those kinds of things. In this case, you saw also an indictment on the school. And, you know, we have a lot of parents even who have said to us, what's the school doing? As if they have no role and responsibility. But in this case, this school was just fucking so unequipped. You could see from the lack of discipline and the lack of interest from the teachers. And, you know, not all teachers are you know, teachers are also, they're stressed, they're underpaid, they're undervalued, all of those things that contribute to how they teach, how they educate. But in this instance, the school knew fuck all how to deal with bullying. And you could see it. You could see it happening in front of your eyes.
And, you know, again, the dynamic of the kind of school it was versus the kind of home it was, vice versa, all these are the combination of ingredients can make for a unique situation that does not have a one-size-fits-all answer. There are those schools who are low-level schools who are ill-equipped to deal with. We find ourselves sometimes in discussions with high-level schools, private schools, wealthy schools, who we have been made aware are having serious issues of bullying, but they don't want us to come and speak. And it's not that they can't afford us. It's that there's a certain thing, and this happens with both certain school environments and parental environments. It's that if you're willing to, or if you are, I'm not even willing, if you are compelled to confront the issues that are going on in your school so head on, it's an admission that there is a problem that you aren't solving. So again, it's the Band-Aid. What schools are doing and have done for decades, especially those with institutionalized bullying, they're so woven into the fabric of the history of the institution, is they have lip service attention to incidents. But again, it's the Band-Aid over the incident. It's not rip the fucking Band-Aid off and let's get all the toxic shit out of the wound. And the same happens in parental responsibility, because while you may have parents like Jamie's parents who really questioned and went, did they do enough? What I wish more parents would do when they do have a school, and this is both bully and victim, when you have a school who calls a parent and says, your child has been displaying bullying behavior, the right and the ideal and the most constructive parental response is to go, thank you for letting me know, I'm going to investigate. That's an ownership of your child. When you say, not my child's an angel, my child wouldn't do this, and how dare you? That is deflection. That's not willing to have a look where the problem starts. The other parental problem is when you get a child who has been bullied, who has been targeted, who has been victimized, and their parent is out for blood and revenge.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the notion of doing too much, right? It's though Jamie's parents were like, did we do enough?
Right.
Doing too much would be them going to the school and filing a restraining order against Jamie's parents and Jamie and litigating and
Which we have seen and been made aware of in one or two schools we have spoken at.
yeah.
And this is the point that I was making, is that I was addressing these parents and going, what does your 11-year-old child know about restraining orders? And now you suddenly want to jump into the fray and show your child how much you care about them by using means at your disposal that actually are not, that are just that aren't really doing what they have to. It's all show and tell. Like litigation and throwing around lawsuits and all that kind of thing is show and tell. But what are you showing? What are you showing your kid who has been bullied? What you're showing them is that that's how you deal with it. But what you're not showing them is how to stand up for themselves when you're not around.
Well, that's the essence, right? I mean, you're not doing one single thing to make them resilient in the face of bullying. And so they're not going to, when they finished school and they're in the workplace and someone's bullying them there or bullying them in, the home ownership association, whatever it is, they're not going to know how to deal with it because daddy or mommy always stepped in and took it to the next level. So overprotecting and that show and tell kind of protection, that's not helping at all. In this particular thing, one of the things that struck me also, and it struck me last night because in the keynote, Bryan talks about Gary Allen being one of the people that he went to and was able to speak to, and which completely changed the trajectory. For Bryan, it changed it for you.
Yeah.
And we happened to be at Gary's daughter's wedding last night, and they were talking about his generosity of spirit and his just being the kind of person that you've spoken about in the keynote. It was almost like I was hearing other people saying what you've said so often.
I experienced. And
yeah.
We didn't talk about it last night, but while the actual ceremony was happening and people were talking about him in that way, always makes me emotional, guys. Always makes me emotional because it was his coming into my life 45 years ago was so profound. And listening to people talk about him, and I was having flashbacks to that moment and to the care he had and the generosity and the empathy and how you can see that he's passed that on to his children. And yeah, anyway.
So what struck me with that, I mean, aside from it just being beautiful to witness, and I mean, he is that kind of a person and always has been. And, and we've spoken about how, he had parents who instilled those values into him. And you can see that he's instilled those values into his children. But it made me think of two things in the context of adolescence. It was like, how different might the outcome have been had Jamie found someone like Gary to talk to and to quell the rage rather than fucking Andrew Tate. And then it made me wonder, like, what might have happened had you not found Gary or had that experience with Gary. I mean, you sought him out, and it was a major transformation in your life. It changed everything.
Sure.
And what might have happened had you not done that? And might you have gone down a much different path? So those were the things that struck me when I was hearing those people talk about him.
The world of Jamie, though, which is the world of every youngster and teenager, is, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have social media. We didn't have access to a world beyond the four walls of our bedroom. So we didn't have role models of that kind. And it wasn't just a question of role models. We know, and it's just that algorithms and social media and all of that drives toxic content because content about preservation of the Amazon and dogs and cats does not get clicks. Toxic content in whatever time in history, whether there was social media or not, when you have conflict, it's the primary key in drama. If you look at any play in history, from Shakespeare to all the Greek tragedies, what is at the heart of drama is conflict. So when you create conflict, there's always going to be winners and losers, and there's always going to be tragedy. And unfortunately, conflict and tragedy sell more, and they're more interesting.
Which brings me to a point which, and this has gone very quickly. I mean, it's almost time for us to wrap. But I'll say this much. I think that, if there's one, if the core takeaways for me, for adolescence, and I think for you, were that parents, schools, and your peers all play a role. Everyone's responsible for this. We all have to do something about it. It's not anyone else's responsibility. Yeah. That was like a core takeaway, that as a community we need to deal with this. It's not my kid's not involved or my kid's not bullied. Your kid's around, and your kid then needs to be an upstander. Everyone needs to be involved. And ironically, kids aren't allowed to see this podcast because although you can be directed to Andrew Tate and hear his disgusting views on women and all other kinds of violence, the word fuck is enough for you to not hear any useful information about bullying. So, maybe your parents will lift the filters for this one. But here's the
So in TikTok language, Jamie didn't commit murder. He caused her to be unalive. For fuck's sake.
I can't even. But the final point I just wanted to make is that if you are one of those people who might just contribute by putting an emoji, if anything, this demonstrates the power of symbols as much as words. And you're a contributor, So figure out what the nice and kind emojis are that make you a defender of someone and use those. but don't just be a lurker and don't just watch it happen beneath your nose.
What I'm thrilled about is that in a tenuous time in history, and I'm using those words deliberately as opposed to saying a tenuous time in the world, because my whole thing, and I've been saying that if you look at the first quarter of last century and the first quarter of this century, how we're seeing the parallels of how history is repeating itself. At a tenuous time in history, when there is so much drive to turn people against each other and to fragment and to destroy, it sometimes feels like we are paddling upstream with a rowing boat that has holes in it. But one person has to do that, and then another person will do it, and another person will do it, because light can spread in the dark, no matter how dark it gets. Light can spread if it lights the flame.
And with that, if you've experienced any of these things, if you have questions around this, if you're a parent or someone who's witnessing these kinds of things, or even an educator, we'd love to hear from you, because this topic really has hit a nerve. This series has hit a nerve. So until next time, cheers.